Number 15. The frenemy. A best friend turned enemy can often turn scary. They know you like the back of their hand. In high school, Redditor Rick Vider had a friend whose girlfriend broke up with him, and this friend took it very badly. So badly, he turned into a stalker. The Redditor explains, he started doing weird stuff like taking his dad's company car and driving to her house, and sitting outside her house at like 4 a.m. This was when they were still dating. When his obsessive behavior finally got him dumped, his obsession only grew. After getting fed up with his friend's extreme behavior, the Redditor befriended the ex-girlfriend. This is when things went haywire. The frenemy thereafter took his dad's car not only to stalk the ex-girlfriend, but also his former friend. He'd drive over to his house at night and throw rocks at his window. On one occasion, he broke into the house through the laundry room door in order to interrogate his ex-friend about his ex-girlfriend, asking all sorts of questions about her. He said he wanted to make his ex love him again by doing what the Scarecrow in the Batman movie did. When school administration caught wind of that, they checked out his locker. What they found there was frightening. Fertilizer, bleach, and a burlap sack with cutout eye holes. He got kicked out of school and was sent to a psychiatric ward. Who knows what he was planning to do with those ingredients? Number 14. Taken captive. When someone you thought you knew turns out to be someone you don't, the whole world turns upside down. Robo Ribbit shared a story of a dude that was friends with his best friend. All three of them used to attend anime and gaming conventions. Although the guy was a bit strange, he was good looking and popular amongst the con girls, but his compulsive lying raised red flags for Robo Ribbit. And as it would turn out, those red flags were waving for a reason. The man was put behind bars for holding his girlfriend captive for more than 2 months, while doing horrible things to her. Those things are too horrifying to even talk about here, but they included sticks, a crowbar, and a blade. It was so bad that she lost all hearing in 1 year. Everyone in the con community was disturbed to hear the news, but it appears only one person suspected who this person was from the start. Number 13. The firefighter. Firefighters are always seen as heroes. This one was quite the opposite. Ekadon was friends with a firefighter who was very serious about his job. He was first a forest firefighter and then a city firefighter. The bottom line is, he loved putting out fires, probably a little too much. At one point, a string of arsons lit through the area, the last of which ended the worst. An old man lost his life in the flames trapped in his room. When the man was finally caught, the culprit was a surprise to most. Who was it but the firefighter who loved his job? He was convicted for his actions. Although he spent some time behind bars, he was out years later. Ekadon writes, I don't feel like the punishment fit for this one. I'm not sure it did either. Number 12. A little off. Z28 Token shares a story about being friends with Tyler Hadley. If you think the name Tyler Hadley sounds familiar, you're right. His particularly lurid case came to light in 2011 when he allegedly took the lives of his parents and threw a party afterwards, while their bodies laid cold in the home. It was a particularly scary event, as Hadley allegedly used a hammer. Afterwards, he posted on Facebook that he'd be throwing a party that same evening, and unbeknownst to most of the partygoers, his parents remained in the master bedroom for the duration of that party. When Hadley told his best friend what he'd done, word spread throughout the party and he was taken into custody the next morning. Hadley was convicted in 2014 and was sentenced to life behind bars. He always seemed a little off, Z28 Token wrote. A little off is putting it mildly. Number 11. House on fire. This one's a long one, so strap in. Redditor Cart2K shares a story of obsession, jealousy, and fire. Cart was one amongst a circle of high school friends, one of whom was named Chris. Chris was obsessed with another boy in the group named Brian. They all lived in the same neighborhood, so they spent a lot of time together. Chris and Brian were childhood friends and besties, but when Cart started hanging with them, he also became close with Brian. Chris didn't like this change in dynamic. After a year, though, he finally accepted that he couldn't separate the pair. He still made Cart uncomfortable. Cart writes, "I knew that something about Chris was off from day one, and the more time I spent with Chris and Brian, the more apparent it became. On one occasion, Cart spotted Chris sniffing Brian's dirty boxers during a sleepover. It was then that he realized Chris had feelings for Brian. After they'd graduated high school, Chris was single, while Brian and the Redditor were both dating. This is when Chris became even more obsessive and controlling." Cart writes, "The next day we found out that someone had broken into Brian's house that night through the sliding glass door in his basement and used gasoline and a lighter fluid to start a fire. Although the fire didn't harm anyone or cause major damage, Brian and his family were afraid. Everyone knew it was Chris. Police got involved, but Chris wasn't charged, nor was anyone else, and the friend group never saw or heard from Chris again. It was probably for the best, considering what Chris was capable of." Number 10. The Demigoddess. Have you ever had a friend who believed she was some sort of demigoddess? Injected Americas has. She wrote, "The girl I used to be friends with believed she was the daughter of some demigoddess and could talk to powerful spirits." The Redditor explains that there were times that she'd question her friend, but the friend would threaten to destroy her soul. She'd also tell the Redditor not to bring any dudes around that she liked, because she didn't want them to fall in love with her instead, as it would hurt their friendship. Even scarier, the demigoddess threatened the Redditor and her family's lives, going into detail about how she'd take their lives. The psycho even carried a blade wherever she went, so she could very well have done so. The moral of the story: steer clear of anyone who claims to be a demigoddess. Number 9. The girlfriend. When friends start to feel stronger about you than you do about them, things can get weird fast, especially when they become possessive of you. Redditor Tangled Lettuce had a friend turn wannabe girlfriend in the 8th grade. When they were grouped together for a science project, she started regularly calling him, not wanting to talk about the project, but rather to force him to listen to Charlie the Unicorn. He ended up weaseling out of her group, but she would still trail through the snow to his house to work on her project. Then she started telling everyone they were dating. This is when things took a stranger turn. Tangled Lettuce writes, "The phone calls got darker as she began to tell me she locks herself in her room at night to prevent slicing her wrists. She'd giggle and laugh about all this too, which made it worse. When school administration heard about the girl through the grapevine, she was eventually given counseling. Although she continued to call him all through the school year, when summer came the calls stopped. Maybe a break was just what she needed to end the obsession." Number 8. The online friend. Modern friendships these days often blossom online. Redditor Osmond Thus So Long has a horror story that might make you stay offline though. The Redditor had a group of online friends who'd all met on the same website. They'd chat online and text and even Skype call. One of these friends was from Australia and decided to visit after he'd come into some money. Everyone was looking forward to meeting him, but that anticipation soon came falling down. The Redditor writes, "He started getting really creepy and trying to get me to his hotel room and away from my significant other. It also came out that he was not in his 30s like we thought, but that he was like 42. Sounds like bad news to me." For some reason, he didn't think about how this tight-knit group of friends might spread the word as he traveled from destination to destination, but they did, and hopefully that prevented history from repeating itself. Number 7. Grace. If you've ever had a weird friend, the type that just seemed a bit off, Power Army has a story for you. Her high school friend was named Grace, and being a reject herself, the Redditor was Grace's friend. No one liked Grace, so the Redditor pitied her. Why was Grace such an oddball? For starters, at around 13 to 14 years old, she would slice herself with plastic knives in the cafeteria at lunch and then tell everyone it was a cat who did it. Why? Who knows? Her antics only grew weirder. She told people she'd attempted to take her life more than a dozen times. Around 16 to 18 years old, she claimed a stone necklace she wore had a person called Gabe trapped inside it who was controlling her. At 18, she faked that she was expecting a child, saying she wasn't the preacher's innocent daughter like everyone thought. When months passed and her lie was discovered, she claimed again that she was expecting a child, this time 4 months along, though she and her boyfriend hadn't been together for 6 months. But the story doesn't end there. Some of Power Army's friends are still connected with Grace on Facebook, and there was a continuing saga between Grace and her now ex-boyfriend. She was now claiming on Facebook that one of the children, we've lost track of which one, was still alive, and she was expecting yet again. 50th time's the charm, I guess. Number 6. The Green Man. Sometimes our best friends during childhood are imaginary. Redditor X-Riot starter 13X shares his story of the Green Man, an imaginary friend he had when he was a child. The Green Man was excessively tall with dark red scrubs on and a doctor's mask. The Redditor explains, I went to a psychiatrist during my teen years, and we kind of figured out that because of my grandparents' failing health when I was young, I spent a lot of time in hospitals. My parents think that the Green Man was a way for me to feel safe, while I spent so much time alone in waiting rooms. The Redditor says he had tea parties with the Green Man, who would often stand behind him with his hand on his shoulder. Don't know about you, but I try to squash this imaginary friend ASAP. Number 5. Silence. What if you lived a lifetime without hearing? What do you think your reaction would be to sound? Redditor Dover Helk shares a story of his best friend, who'd been deaf for all his life and just gotten cochlear implants. After the implants, everyone stood around him. As his wife spoke, he began to cry, hearing her for the first time. They then each in turn spoke so that he could hear their names said aloud and hear what they sounded like. The scene was very emotional. After the rounds had been made, the room was silent. The man asked what that sound was, and the Redditor said that was silence he was hearing. The man said it wasn't silence. All his life he'd heard silence, but this sounded different. Dover Hulk writes, a sound came from just outside the hospital room and he perked up immediately. Isn't that silence? He asked. We all exchanged looks of trepidation around the room before I spoke. No, that was the sound of someone screaming. That story is either a horrifying truth or scary fiction. Number 4. The Arch Enemy. Redditor Anonymous278's story is as twisted as they come. In high school and college, she had a male best friend called Doug with whom she lived with. Their relationship was sibling-like and there was no romance there. After college, they remained best friends and often hung out. Hanging out in the bar, they met Meredith to their detriment. Anonymous knew Meredith through a friend in college, and they remained in touch casually. She seemed a lot of fun that night and lived nearby, so the trio started hanging out a lot. They all became close friends. In fact, Meredith seemed like a really good friend. As time went by, it was clear Meredith had a crush on Doug, just when he'd started dating someone else. Doug knew about her crush and felt a little bad about it, so he didn't bring his girlfriend around much. Time passed, and as Doug's relationship with his love fell apart, he started dating Meredith. Bad idea. Gradually, she became excessively controlling to the point that she wouldn't allow Doug to hang out with Anonymous or any of his friends. One crazy incident after another, and Anonymous didn't want to deal with Meredith anymore. Sadly, Doug stopped hanging out with his old friend too in exchange for this bizarre relationship. But after almost a year had passed, Doug came to his senses, and when he did, he met up with Anonymous and filled her in on what had been going on. Meredith's controlling and paranoid nature had skyrocketed to the point that neither of them left the house. She threatened to harm herself if he left her, but during one major blowout it all came out. Anonymous writes, it turns out that she had logged in his computer when she crashed at our apartment the very first night. From that point on, she gradually gotten access to his credit card and bank accounts, his social media accounts, his cell phone account, etc. She would literally follow him around town even before they were dating via pending charges. Meredith had groomed Anonymous for 7 to 8 months in order to get closer to Doug, while simultaneously keeping close tabs on Doug's closest female friends. This twisty-turny saga takes the phrase "keep your friends close and your enemies closer" to the next level. It's lucky Doug got out alive. Number 3. The Creeper. The very first line of the thread posted by Lady Captain America is, "My best friend is a creep." So you know we're in for a good story. This Redditor is a young woman working in IT. When she clicked with one of her co-workers, Dawn, she was relieved to have a friend. At the time, the Redditor was having family troubles and financial issues, and was considering going back to her therapist. She confided all her issues in Dawn, because he was a good friend whom she trusted. He convinced her that he would help her work through anything, and there was no need for therapy. Due to the financial issues, she listened. As they became even closer, she found out Dawn was older, married, and had a kid. He claimed the marriage was an arranged marriage and he wasn't happy in it. The confidence that they shared with each other solidified her trust in him. They continued to text, and he started requesting pictures. The requests were at first innocuous, and he claimed he just wanted her to send selfies to promote self-love. But soon they started getting more specific. The Redditor got fed up with his behavior and started to avoid him, but he managed to weasel his way back into her life with an apology, so she gave him a second chance. 2 weeks went past, and Dawn turned creepy again, asking more bizarre and strange questions over text. This time she ended contact. Hopefully she reported him to HR as well, as some Redditors advised. Number 2. The Life Taker. Redditor Greymore tells of an old friend who became an ex-friend at a young age. He attempted to force himself on the Redditor's younger sister, so he was immediately cut out of his life. That early experience revealed the true nature of this man. Years later, the creep was dating the author's ex, and through Greymore tried to warn her about him. She didn't listen. She endured emotional and physical harm from the guy, which ended in a restraining order. Several more years passed, and the man was charged with taking the life of a man for dating another ex of his. He confessed to his actions in court. Greymore writes, his family is genuinely very nice and tried for years to fix the worst of his problems. Sounds like he had problems that couldn't be fixed. Before we get to number 1, my name is Chills and I hope you're enjoying my narration. If you're curious about what I look like in real life, then go to my Instagram at DylanIsChillinYT and tap that follow button to find out. It's a proven fact that generosity makes you a happier person, so if you're generous enough to hit that subscribe button and the bell beside it, then thank you. This way, you'll be notified of the new video we upload every Tuesday. Number 1. Blast from the past. Social media has made it so much easier for friends from our past to find us, sometimes to our own detriment. Redditor Mo7IA7TY shares her story of a friend she had in primary school. When she changed schools in 5th grade, their friendship fell apart. But when he found her on Facebook when she was 22 or 23 and claimed to be organizing a school reunion, he asked for her number and thinking nothing of it, she gave it to him. That's when the bad things started. He immediately called and texted dozens of times that night. She didn't answer at first, but after it became clear that he wouldn't stop, she chatted with him a bit about school memories. Soon he asked her out, which she rejected. He even found out where she worked and would show up to hover over her. It got even more intense when he started sending links to rental properties that they could move into together. She never responded to his texts and only responded to a few of his first Facebook messages. So really, he was living in a fantasy world with the little conversation they had. The Redditor wrote, he would constantly try to get me to give him my address, which I would never do. But every night at work, I was so scared he would be in the car park waiting to follow me home. This just shows the scary reality women can find themselves in when they're just trying to be nice. Unsurprisingly, there was no reunion. Mo discovered this after messaging another former schoolmate that the man claimed to still be friends with and seemed to know everything about. The schoolmate said that she hadn't talked to him since primary school. After telling her coworkers about this man, one of them knew him. Mo writes, her daughter had rented a room to him a year or so earlier and had kicked him out when one night she woke up and he was sitting on her bed watching her sleep. This coworker took his phone number and called the man. Although Mo doesn't know what she said to him, it must have been bad enough to make him cease his actions. Well, not entirely. He still tries to Facebook stalk her from different accounts. Thanks for checking out this video. Be sure to subscribe because we upload new countdowns every Tuesday and Saturday. Or if you're still not convinced, here are some of our other videos that I think you'd like. Enjoy!